Ruxandra, thank you very much for the invitation and for having all of us here. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure for me to be here today and to come back after the first conference that we held in the same room, I think, 3.5 years ago, in I think November 2019, which was the first forum that was organized in Bucharest. And again, it's really great to be in this lovely city once again. So this morning, I'm joined by 4 colleagues who represent, I would say, a very diverse representation from the payments field. We have the banking sector represented, we have the fintech sector represented, and then we have an international card scheme also with us. And what we will discuss this morning, I mean, the title of the panel this morning is the evolving payments markets. And what we want to share with you and hopefully listen from the different speakers is really to know very well how the current status in terms of payments regulation and in the market, how this is working. This would be the first, I would say, theme that we will discuss. The second one will be the future-looking regulation and legislation that will be happening in a month's time, at least from the EU side. It's multitude of initiatives that we will also discuss, and then how you are preparing for that, what you are looking for. And then we will end, with a third, I would say, theme, which is more around innovation and, how these different initiatives work when it comes to innovation. Do we have a very complex regulatory framework, or do we need, to do more? Again, we will listen more to that. But before going into these 3 themes, let me maybe present very quickly my fellow panelists. So on my right-hand side, we have Greta Schulte, so Secretary General of the European FinTech Association. Also to the right, so Florin Danescu, who is also like the Managing Director of the Romanian Banking Association, representing the banking sector. Also from the banking side, it's great to have Gabriela Nistor, CEO of Idea Bank. Welcome. And then last but not least, representing Visa and the CEE region, so Konrad Sluzarczyk, so Director of Government Engagement, so at Visa. So welcome, everyone. And for those of you who don't know me, so my name is Eli Beiruti. I'm Vice President in charge of European Government Affairs at American Express, and at the same time, I chair the European Payments Institutions Federation, so the main PI association, Payment Institutions Association in Brussels. So let's start first with our first theme. So the current, I would say, state of play of the payments landscape right now. And I'll start with you, Greta. I'm interested in the views first from the fintech sector. We know PSD2 in particular, the Payment Services Directive, had 2, I would say, major innovations, when it was adopted. So one which was more like in the open banking area, so the whole like TPPs, the whole third-party providers, AISPs, PISPs, etc. How this has changed, your sector, the fintech sector in particular, and then we will listen to how banks also think about this. So.
Thank you so much, Eli. I think, first of all, thanks so much for having us here today. I'm very excited to be here. And then to your question, I think PSD2, listen, it's been a milestone, right? I think it has led to more innovation on the market, it has led to more competition, but I think something that we see from the fintech perspective is that it's not really a regulation made for fintech, because just looking at our association, which has about 40 members, I think PSD2 finally entered into force in 2015, and the large majority of our members weren't even in existence by then. So I think the major, let's say, fintech boom, so to say, where lots of fintech were founded, was very much like 2016 to 17 to 18, and we're still seeing it today. So it's not really a regulation for fintech. So while it has done a lot to foster competition in the market, it doesn't take us into account because we weren't there at the time. So we think that perhaps we should be a bit more ambitious than what we have seen under PSD2, and granted that there are a lot of important steps that have been taken, and also I think outside of PSD2, developments on instant payments that we've seen were very important developments, but yet we have seen that we want essentially a regulatory framework that is open to all players and that also is very much future forward, because what we're seeing now that essentially when PSD2 entered into force in 2015, it was already outdated a couple of years later when other players entered into the market. So what we would wish for is really something that takes into account, or regulation that takes into account, these massive developments that we're seeing in the financial services sector. And I think the way that things are developing, progress will just be faster and faster and faster. So we need something that is open to more innovation in the market, and that is essentially, I think, our point on that.
Thank you very much for that. Maybe moving to Florine. So again, on the PSD2 and maybe beyond the other regulatory initiatives, when PSD2 has been, discussed and adopted, like we mentioned open banking, that was very important. I'm interested in your views on this because, we know the banking sector in general had some reservations, or they wanted to make sure like certain security elements were also there. So I'm interested in your views on this. And then the second part would be more on something also that Ruxandra has mentioned, so the strong customer authentication and this journey that now is I would say the new norm when it comes to the security of payment. So please.
Thank you. Well, I guess the best part I can speak is about our experience before the PSD2, let's say, and to transfer this experience to our days. When we started the debate about the subject, I remember that the banks were perceived that they were against somehow. But the real reason was about their experience, about the things that more and more the technological approach, the regulatory approach became, exceeded by the perception of the markets, by the perception of the public, by the perception of the politicians. And this is becoming more and more important, and it is a thing that the technicians must understand and must accept. Also, a very important matter is to understand that the education, generally speaking education, we are used to say financial education for banks, because we are here speaking very technically, we are speaking about the technical education of the people and their perception about the strong authentication, let's say, right? So this is the field, the shape I intend to discuss today. So the banks expressed the position that it is a matter of changing the same type of rights and exchange of information, but the real reason was because of this market perception, because of this experience. Today we are in a better shape, for sure, and we demonstrated in the past that we are really open to this. We exceeded, hopefully, with success, all this challenging, but the matter for the future, the most important thing for the future is to understand that simultaneously with the technological development, with the regulatory development, it is about market perception or public perception. This is really important, and this is my takeaway I want to give today.
Thank you very much. Moving to Gabriela, so these challenges maybe for you as a CEO of a bank, when you are presented with like, okay, we need to comply with all these new, pieces of regulation, you have to provide more info to these new fintechs or TPPs, and then at the same time, we have to adopt new standards in terms of security and so on. So How have you seen the positive elements, I would say, of PSD and, again, the other pieces from the bank's perspective?
So now I'm coming from a bank that, so we are building now a digital bank, the first digital bank made in Romania. And I can speak from this experience, but also from my last experience, because I worked before for Banca Transilvania for many, many years. So I had the PSD2 implementation being in that bank. So PSD2 has two main goals: to make electronic transaction easier and to also to increase security for payments. And I think with this strong customer authentication, we as banks have made important steps. And now I would say that banks in general provide good experiences for customers. The security increased indeed. Regarding open banking, I think we have still work to do. There is need for standardized solutions here. But I think also I have seen some opportunities, because at the beginning, and thinking about what Greta said before, thinking about fintechs at the beginning, maybe all the banks or big players were somehow concerned about what would happen in the future, what will be with open banking. But later on, we have seen many opportunities, and in Banca Transilvania, and even now, we have the intention to cooperate with the fintechs, not only to compete with them. And this opens very, very interesting doors in this field of payments. So I have seen a lot of cooperation and good solution appearing in the market with this.
Thank you very much for that. Last but not least in this round, so Konrad, for you, so you're not directly regulated by the Payment Services Directive, but you had actually to deal with a lot of its consequences, and most, I would say, importantly, was the strong customer authentication, and we know the whole story and the delays and what happened. So how do you see, like, if you can address like this point on SCA, and more generally, how do you see the payments landscape in the EU currently?
Bună dimineața, good morning. Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure. Thank you for this question, Ali. I think a lot of interesting points have been already raised. Let me maybe start with a general remark, what we have been observing in the last few years, starting with a PSD2, but it's definitely not the only regulation that we have seen upcoming. Current policymakers and consumers' demands as well have been forefronting all those digital innovating changes that we have seen on a European landscape. That's why we had to deal with so many of those policies and regulations in place, PSD2 being one of the crucial ones. And indeed, we have seen PSD2 as being a stepping stone for many developments in a security layer especially, but also opening the field for open banking and free access to payment accounts for consumers. Obviously, we know that we have been observing a lot of challenges on the way, especially with the implementation side. You rightly said that we have not been supervised or regulated per se as a payment organization, but being in the global network, having a vast chain of our clients and also the consumers who we tend to support, we have been on a daily basis struggling with this implementation side, and we have seen so many challenges ahead of us. Nevertheless, we definitely appreciate the positive impact PSD2 brought to the general ecosystem. Needless to say, 50% of lowering the fraud rates counting from January 2020 is a great achievement. That's something we take for granted right now. But there's a lot of challenges ahead of us that we need to still consider. And I would say, just to sum up my first sentence here, that what we see as the probably biggest challenge and biggest opportunity, on the other hand, is the forward, future-looking or future approach to all the regulations, including PSD2, that the policymakers, decision makers need to take. We as industry, as business, are trying as hard as we can to develop those solutions that are convenient and yet very secure for our clients, customers. So we need to work hand in hand with regulators, with policymakers to shape the legislation in a way that it gives us a certain level of flexibility to achieve those overarching goals.
Well, thank you very much for that, and I think this is a great transition to the next theme that we want also to discuss with the panelists, which is the future-looking legislation. And to be honest, like we were discussing in the morning, and we have too many initiatives that will be happening very soon that will keep all of us here, I think, busy for a few years. Well, we have the instant payments proposal that is in the last, I would say, rounds of adoption in Brussels. In June, by the end of June, we will have a new proposal for PSD3 or PSR, so Payment Services Regulation, we know very well, but the revision of PSD2 will be there with a new proposal, open finance proposal, and then also a digital euro proposal, which maybe we'll discuss also in our third round on innovation. I know in Romania there's no euro yet, but then again, I think this is something that is going to shape the future of payments. But so thinking about all these new initiatives, so some that are very close to getting done, some that will be proposed. What are your asks? What would you like to see? You mentioned, standardization and open banking on others. So I'm interested in this round in knowing, like, how would you like the future, this future, I would say, landscape to look like? So I'll start maybe with you first, Gabriela.
Okay, thank you. So PSD2 came in the market in 2018, maybe, if I remember well. The latest part of it. We had a long journey, but many things happened in the meantime. We had the COVID, the part when, if I remember well, in Banca Transilvania, in few months we had 500,000 customers making their first payment online in that period. This means a lot of change in people's behavior, and this behavior was here to remain and to stay, and we have to adapt to this. Also, a lot of new electronic transaction. We have now buy now, pay later. So all this, I think, could be somehow regulated or considered in this PSD3. Also, maybe the involvement of some authorities. I'm thinking now how simple would be the onboarding process, for example, in some application, if we would have the authorities part of the process. This would bring more, this would make the process easier, but also more secure for the participants, for all the players in this market. So this type of things I see being addressed. Also, as I said, this part of not maybe enlarging a little bit the part with the strong customer authentication from 90 days to maybe a longer period, but also considering and balancing the easiness with the security of, because people will need more and more this security and trust in the ecosystem. Yeah, I think this would be in my opinion.
Oh, very, very good suggestions. Conrad, so your wish list, I don't know, you don't want to be regulated by PSD3, I guess, but what other wishes would you like to have, also from a customer's perspective? What do you hear from your customers?
Seems like our wishes as an organization might be actually coming true, as seemingly payment systems and schemes might not be effectively regulated. We'll see about that until June, fingers crossed. But anyway, I would start with what I ended about my last sentence, which is this principle-based approach. We definitely strongly encourage decision makers to shape the regulatory framework in a way that will grant certain flexibility to all the industry players, to achieve those goals, meaning, open access to digital payments, security, protection, and those main themes, I would say, on the horizon. And this is probably the overarching ask that we are having. Going further, I would divide our requests into two groups, one about the convenience, the other one about security. So nothing new, I would say, for all of us. In regards to the convenience, we as an organization, we know how hard it is to achieve this right balance between applying the solutions for the consumers, for end users, to be as convenient, as secure as possible in the same way, meaning that very frequently when we look at those all benefits that strong customer authentication brought to the markets, we sometimes tend to forget about this convenience factor for the end users. Just to give you an example, we are so well protected by SCA that sometimes we forget that this comes with the friction to some of the groups of the consumers. We see that this abandonment rate of purchases, especially online purchases, is growing, especially in our side of Europe. We are not using all the prescribed exemptions to the best possible way, and we feel there's definitely room to grow when we're talking, for instance, about transaction risk analysis. This is the exemption very well adopted in Western European markets, whereas in other part of Europe it's not as much adoptable right now. We have numerous solutions to address it. I believe banks as well, but we just need to be a little bit more bold about implementing them, of course, always within those prescribed legal frames. When it comes to the security layer, we are so much focused as an organization on this particular aspect. We have invested $9 billion in the last 5 years only, globally speaking, to protect our network, to protect our clients and consumers. And we feel this is definitely the way forward. And we see also by the proposition of PSD3 that this particular aspect will be very much focused on by the Commission itself. And we believe, again, that we need to have a strong cooperation between the policymakers and between the business to make those solutions efficient for the consumer, not to diminish the convenience, but also to protect and make them trusting into the solutions that we are providing, because trust is everything.
Trust is definitely extremely important, and for banks, trust is actually the most important objective, and that's I think what leads in everything you do with your clients. So for you, Florian, so how do you see the future? What is the wish list of banks?
Well, I guess we can expand what you have been said. Trust is about the whole economy, not only about banks. Is becoming more and more real and pragmatic. The challenge for the future, I guess, it will be which will be the ratio in approach of the subject, of the technical subject, of the technical people versus political people. Okay? So the decision will be, we are going in an era where the populism is covering more and more from the decision. So this will be the challenge, I guess. I am in the middle of such a debate, let's say. We found out that the payment formula must be changed, okay? So mathematics. And the future will be in this dilemma, I guess, how the technical things for the people development will remain in the hands of the technical people. How the political decision will act in respect of the realities of the technology, in respect of the economy, in respect of the mathematics, and other sciences, let's say. I guess this will be the subject that will take more and more from our resources, despite the industries, all the industries, and this will be the challenge for the future. We see that, for example, the inflation, to add to what Gabi have been said, the inflation now is challenging the business models everywhere, right? The cash management will be changed. So that will put a pressure from the public perception to the technology, to everything. It is not only a matter of market today, selling and buying, demand and offer. It is about the difference between perception and reality. So I invite all the technical people, all the technocrats, let's say, right? All the professions to insert resources to perceive, to understand, to act in respect of these challenges. Otherwise, we are looking very nice. We are talking about huge important things here, but this, I believe, will be the challenges for the future. I'm sorry that I'm acting like Nostradamus, but we are having our experience, and we must see, say, understand these things. Thank you.
No, this is pretty important, and in the third round, I will be also focusing a bit on the importance of politics and some policy aspirations bigger than payments, like sovereignty and other aspects. Like we'll come to that in the third one. But before that, Greta, I know you weren't too happy because you believe like PSD2 hasn't taken the fintech concerns on board, and now actually you are there, you have an association, your voice is heard, so what do you want to tell policymakers and others about your concerns?
Maybe let me start with the one that's almost, I think, in the last stages, so with instant payments. I think we're very happy with the way that instant payments has developed, essentially giving consumers more choice, having more competition on the market, but we think that we can still be a bit more ambitious on that one. So I think ultimately we believe that instant payments should be free. We don't think there should be any fees of any kind. And also taking into consideration how we're in Bucharest today, we also very much encourage the ambition on non-Euro member states and to have these rules applicable to banks outside of the Eurozone. I think that is something that is very important. Then just looking at what's on the horizon on like PSD3, open finance, perhaps also digital euro, I think for us what's important is to sort of rectify that situation that I focused on the first round of questions here, is to essentially have direct access for all players, so also for all payment services providers. Of course, providing there are certain safeguards. And in that regard, I think we also need to be looking at who are the players on the financial market today. I mean, of course, you still have the incumbents, you have the new fintechs that have been entering the market over the past 10 years or so. I think it's also important to look into the direction of big tech that are increasingly entering the market of financial services, and to not make that, I wouldn't say mistake again, but perhaps to think more about the future this time around. And for us, that really means taking into consideration like regulation that is fit for purpose. And for us, that's based on the principle of same activity, same risk, same rules. So to really see what services are provided and rather regulating those services than the entity providing them. And then I think we can unlock the potential also in terms of open finance, because I think that especially open finance, there's tremendous potential also for the European consumers across the entire union. I mean, Gabriella has touched upon financial literacy early on. I think that is definitely something where we can be doing more and where we should be doing more in times of also financial hardship that we're currently seeing. But I think that we need to create this environment that really fosters the most innovative and most customer-centric solutions.
A very nice wish list, so I think you're very well heard, and those who will be negotiating, these proposals in few months will hopefully take these asks into consideration. Now is the time for our last round, in which I will ask you to be even quicker, to allow for a few minutes for Q&A session at the end. But so in this third round of questions, I wanted to tackle two main things. The first one is innovation in payments, because this is very important. Do you see regulation, or is your experience when it comes to regulation that it is helping innovation or not in the EU? That's the first theme. The second one is also a bit linked to it, but it's more like this sovereignty aspect that we keep hearing, from the ECB, from different commissioners. Conrad, I'll start with you in a minute, but your company and others also are always cited at, how shall we move from that? How shall we grant more sovereignty to the EU? So your thoughts about these debates when it comes to policy making, and also I think Florine has alluded to, and then the link with innovation.
All right, thank you, Ale. I'll try to be brief, which might be challenging. Indeed, sovereignty agenda, as we call it, is something that pays a lot of attention of all the policymakers and decision makers at the EU level, but also at the market levels. We as an international company, we always vouch for, but of course, very much, based in the core of Europe. We always vouch for, everything that is the most benefiting for European society. We have 60 years of experience, and we try to leverage this experience in all the developments that we are doing at the European and market levels as well. We always say that we are happy to contribute to the development like instant payments framework, for instance, which we definitely see a value of. But of course, with opportunities, there comes challenges. This will be a newly established framework, not matured yet, with some potential complexities on the way. So we are, just trying to strike the right balance between anything that is being developed. And we see this sovereignty agenda. I don't want to explore too much on that, because it's also a bit of a political topic, so probably not the best place to elaborate on this. But in essence, we see a huge potential when it comes to regulations and policy decisions to meet both incumbent companies with new entrants and make them contribute to the very growth of the markets in general. And we see it through the innovation aspects and innovation opportunities, like Digital Euro, for instance. We have been very much observing, but also participating in all possible discussions in the global, European, and market level with central banks, with the European Central Bank, with our partners from the industry, because we see a huge potential here, which we try to explore. Definitely, if it's successful, it can meet both ways, I would say. So achieving those policy objectives, public policy objectives, like preserving the role of public money, but also addressing the issue or challenge of diminishing of cash payments from the society, but also, feeding into the financial inclusion. The priorities, the key drivers are very different for different markets, so we try to also evaluate how this can work for the whole industry, or whole society at large. And definitely this is something that we see valuable if there will be some conditions met on the way, like bringing the robust technology, meeting the consumers' demands to the table, close collaboration between the public and private sector. This is crucial to achieve its goals, and also having the relevant acceptance, because without acceptance, there's no point of building anything new, because it won't come up as something widely utilized. Maybe with that, I will stop on CBDC, and if you give me one more minute, I will just elaborate on something that is very close to our minds, which is another piece of, I would say, policy rather than legislation at this stance, which is the revision of EIDAS directive. We see it as a great opportunity, because here we have links between the authentication factor, which could be effectively used for those newly built infrastructure, for digital wallets, for identifying consumers, identifying citizens at the European level, and also mixing this with payments in the public and private space. We at Visa have been very engaged from the very beginning into the piloting phases of those discussions. taking part in one of the consortium. And I'm very proud to say that we have achieved a good collaboration level with Romanian government, in particular being one of those members of this future framework. So just in a nutshell, this is, I would say, another layer of this legislative and yet innovative pieces that we are observing. And I think, combining and linking all those developments that are happening is in a sufficient and efficient way. It's definitely something, we need to contribute, all of us as an industry.
Thank you. Gabriela, your perspective, maybe a bit quicker than Conrad.
I will try. I will try to address more the innovation issue than the other one. I think innovation has to come from any field, being the private sector or the public sector. Innovation should be here. On the other hand, we could say that the public sector could maybe act more as an enabler and to support, to provide a framework for innovation, because in the private sector we have, I think, enough focus on innovating things. We're building a digital bank now. We are in the forefront of innovation. We are trying to keep up with all the developments we see. But it's interesting now that also some of the, I wouldn't say fintechs, but maybe, I don't know, new innovators, and I'm thinking now about AI. I was last week at a conference, and now they are asking to be regulated. Years ago, many companies didn't want to be regulated, but now they are asking to be regulated in order to probably to provide more trust in the innovation they're putting in the market now. So this is an interesting perspective for regarding innovation, and I think both public sector and private sector can work together and cooperate for this important field. For the other one, for digital euro, and I'm not sure that we have now, at least this is my opinion, we have enough input, or we don't have the full picture to have an opinion on this. As far as I know, the authorities, they are still thinking how to put in place all the details regarding this, and they are thinking to have this just only as an addition to the cash, in the market, and not to replace totally the cash in the market. And this can be a good idea to replace partially the cash in the market, and I see it, but as I said, I don't think that even they have now the full picture yet.
Thank you. Greta?
Yeah, I think when we're thinking about innovation, where does innovation really come from, or where did the idea for a digital euro really come from? In the end, I think we were all aware that the private sector somehow picked up on consumer demands to translate cash payments into a digital world. And then, especially on European level, there was a bit of a, what does this mean for us? Like, what sort of framework can we build around it? And rightfully so, because I think that these decisions, they do touch our sovereignty at a very crucial level. But I think it needs to go somewhat hand in hand, because, when looking at now at the digital euro, I think it will come either way. So the introduction of a CBDC in Europe will come either way, and it's just a matter of how we're dealing with it. So also grateful, I think the Commission has also invited industry to a couple of roundtables over the past months, so I think that's a very good sign. I think it's important not to lose touch with what we actually want to achieve, and I think Commissioner McGuinness has made it clear very, very firmly, and a couple of times where she said that, the digital euro cannot be something that we're introducing top down, but it needs to come from bottom up. And I think that is where, again, private sector can be beneficial, because in the end, the private sector is very much closer to the customer as the public sector is in the end, with all their, you know, knowledge about customer intimacy, consumer intimacy that they have. And I think ultimately it will go hand in hand. So to have the private sector observing what the customer wants or what they would wish for in the future, and then public sector sort of providing the framework to seeing that and, yeah, let's say provide guidelines and also foster more innovation from that.
Thank you. Last but not least, Florine.
Let me say that I did not expect it that my colleagues will be more diplomats like me, comparing with me, okay? So I believe that innovation, it is a matter of bigger framework. The framework of Europe competing with the framework of, I don't know, United States, competing with the framework of China, and so on, okay? We need a regional approach in European Union for a better framework for economy, for innovation, for technology. Otherwise, tomorrow morning we will see again that we need to be, I don't know, carbon-free tomorrow morning. And all the regulation and all the initiatives of the industry will follow this demand, political demand. It is just an example. So all the responsible industries, also banking, of course, need to have strong, I don't know, cooperation together with the other responsible industries for a bigger framework for innovation in European Union, I believe, because it is a matter of future and competition and success altogether. This is, I'm sorry that I'm so large in debate, but let's be proactive and start today to talk about these things. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I mean, this discussion could be taken, you know, for a bit more time, but unfortunately we're at time. We don't have more time for questions. I guess we will move to the next panel. So I invite all of you who have questions to our panelists, please, you know, we have the coffee break after the coming session. So with that, I think we have set the scene for now the next panel who's going to discuss innovation drivers. So we'll learn more about like how innovation could be fostered in the EU. But with that, I will ask you to all join me, you know, in really thanking my dear panelists for this great discussion. Thank you.